Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today we're going to be talking about the most recent banned and suspended announcement, and then doing a bit of a tier list for Classic Constructed. I'll be doing a Blitz tier list since that's going to be a pretty relevant format at the World Championship. I'll do that tier list in maybe a few days, but for now I want to focus on the most popular format, Classic Constructed, and how this one ban might change the meta and what the meta would look like after all these national events anyways. We are about a month away from the World Championship. I will be there, so come say hi if you're there. I'll be playing in the World Championship, and I'm very excited for that. Lots of practice to do between now and then in CC and Blitz, but let's hop right into it. So they wrote a pretty long little essay here just to explain basically why they banned Pulse of Isenloft, right? A single card has left the format. It is a legendary card. It's just one copy. But it's a pretty huge card for Oldhim. It was a very powerful defensive tool into aggro decks when you can pitch it to his ability to trade a card and 2 life, which is very powerful. And it was also a pretty powerful card to single card fuse Oakenold, which was one of the strongest things you could do. So very powerful combination of cards right there. And I think it makes sense for it to leave the format. Banned is a bit of a surprise to me, but I guess it is probably too strong in even future elemental heroes. I know some people were calling for maybe Crown of Seeds ban, Belittle ban. I had quite a few guesses at bans like Belittle, Crown of Seeds, maybe even something like Channel Lake Frigid, but I think the format was probably in a pretty balanced spot. This was probably my favorite meta I've ever played in. The National Championship 2022 meta, whatever you want to call it. Probably one of the best metas, if not the best meta Flesh and Blood's had so far. And so it makes sense that they only wanted to do a light touch. They just kind of wanted to maybe power down Oldhim a little bit. You can see he won the majority of national championships compared to any of the other heroes. But still, a lot of other heroes, Briar taking down, more than half as many as Oldhim, and Icelander taking quite a lot as well. So very healthy meta, and I like the light touch here. Let's hop into looking at how that's going to affect our tier list. So this is the tier list I put out last time before we entered this meta. Let's kind of talk about where I was right, where I was wrong. We can kind of look at a lot of this based on what each hero took down in terms of number of national championships. Our top 5 here, you can see are Oldhim, Briar, Icelander, Viscera, and Fi, right? And Oldhim winning almost double Briar here. So I think I would say it's a safe call that Oldhim was the only S tier. And then after that, we had Icelander, Briar, Viscera, and Fi. So everyone else in A tier except for Dromai. I think I was probably too high on Dromai. It seems like a lot of people were too high on Dromai. And for that reason, I think Dromai is probably closer to B tier. She loses just a little too hard to these 3 aggro decks that are all performing quite well. So that's us looking at the top 5 here. That have taken down, all the heroes that took down more than a single national championship. Outside of that, we've got Lexi, Dash, Bravo, Reinhardt, and Dromai all with 1. And looking at those heroes, none of those heroes I have in S tier or A tier. Dash, though, I do think probably moves up to A tier. That tank Dash build that Magnolia Gaming with Jacob Bao popularized and took to a finish at top 8 at nationals is very interesting, very powerful into Oldhim. There's almost no way for Oldhim to beat it unless they really high roll. Like, it blocks so well, it sets up the item so well. I don't really see a world where you have worse than like an 80% win rate into Oldhim with that tank Dash. And so then you're just trying to figure out your other matchups into stuff like Icelander, the aggro decks, and Dromai, right? But you kind of get that little bit of a buy into the Guardian matchup, which is going to be one of the most popular decks. So I think Dash moves up there. That tank Dash build is definitely what I would recommend being on right now if you wanted to play Dash. And I think the rest of this probably stays. I think, Lexi got a win here. You can see along with Dash, Bravo, Rhino, and Dromai. So I think Lexi maybe can move up to the bottom of B tier here. And basically all of these heroes in B tier got a single nationals win. I think Dorinthia didn't win a nationals, but I still think she's pretty powerful. I think she had the ability to win a nationals if she needed to. But outside of that, I don't think the meta shifts drastically. I think, like I showed, Dromai goes down a tier, Dash goes up a tier. I'm not really sure if Oldhim is how much that pulse span is going to hit OLDHIM. I think there's a chance he probably goes either more aggressive and it just doesn't worry about Oakenold as much, right? It's going to be a bit harder to fuse, so maybe just more stuff like Enlightened Strike, Choke Slam, Endless Winter, more aggressive, or he goes more defensive since he can't fuse Oakenold more often, and you're running like Staunch Responses, Sink Below, Fate Foreseen, Oasis Respite, the whole like defensive package, right? I think you could probably go either way. It might be a little hard to do both now before Pulse lets you kind of pivot between aggressing with Oakenold or defending with your hero ability. And it gave a lot of flexibility, right? It lets you have those powerful turns of being defensive or powerful aggressive turns, either way, right? Now you're not going to be able to fuse Oakenold as often, and it's quite hard to double hero ability without playing some bad yellow ice or earth cards, right? So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up there. I do think there's a chance he drops down to like the top of A tier here. But outside of that, I think he's probably, A plus tier, I guess, if that was a thing. Let's talk a little bit about A tier, right? So I think I've said enough about, these heroes. I wouldn't, if we're talking about taking a CC hero to the World Championship, I probably wouldn't play any of the heroes from B down, right? I think you could win the World Championship with any of the heroes up here, any of these 6 heroes, which is, in my opinion, a pretty healthy format. I mean, 6 viable heroes is amazing when you look at stuff like the Starvo format, when essentially the only heroes I would ever say you should play were Starvo or Chain. And both of those heroes are so broken that they're living legend now. So this is a lot more viable. It's a lot more fun to me. We've got quite a few aggro decks here, a few control decks, a nice setup deck, a much more balanced setup deck because the setup deck doesn't have Spectra, which is a pretty silly mechanic. So a much more balanced format here with these top 6 decks, and it's not like, how do I play into Starvo or Chain? So looking at the ordering, though, right? I think Phi is probably going to be known as at least the second best deck. He's the most consistent aggro deck. He doesn't really have off turns in the same way that Runeblades do. Runeblades can draw all non-attack actions, or a clunky all-attack action even can be clunky sometimes. But Phi is just all damage. He doesn't need to have synergies per se. He's just straight damage at your opponent. But I do think he has a lower ceiling than a Channel Mount Heroic, Fuse, Force of Nature, draw, 40 plus damage turn that you can just bust out with Briar. Viserai is like certainly the weakest of them all, and I do think he probably belongs more at the top of B tier. I think he has a little bit more consistency over Briar, but I just don't see the power in the same way that Phi and Briar have, right? So I'm actually going to bump him down here to the top of B tier. I don't think he has the power in the same way that the other 2 aggro decks do. And then Iyslander has some great game into everything. Basically, all of these decks have game into each other in one way or another, which is really nice. The only deck that might not is OLDHIM might struggle a little into the tank dash or control dash or whatever you want to call it. Outside of that, though, I think they've all got at least some amount of game into each other. I'm going to say the dark horse of the format is probably Briar. At least in North America, people aren't really talking about Briar. It's mostly these 3 decks, the 2 ice heroes with Iyslander and OLDHIM, and then Phi. These are like considered the top 3 decks. It's what most people are probably going to be planning their deck into. And then if you look at the numbers, though, Briar is very easily the second best deck in terms of converting into national championship wins. But none of these wins are in North America. It's a few European, and an Asian, but no like North American here like we have with other heroes. I mean, we have for North America, we've got an Iyslander win, and then we also had OLDHIM win our calling, right? And then Canada was won by an OLDHIM. So you can see a lot more favored towards the ice heroes here. So locally, I don't see a lot of Briar, and it's not talked about very much, right? But I don't think she's fallen off at all. I think she's just not something that's very popular over here. And I think people aren't going to be prepared for her. At least people here are going to be focusing more on how to beat Phi and how to beat OLDHIM and Iyslander when they're just going to get Channel Mount Heroic sometimes. I think she's not fully solved yet. People kind of just jumped ship off of the Belittle build. I still really like the Belittle build. I like a lot of things that Briar can do still. The Arsenal Pass showed off Explosive Growth as a pretty powerful like mini Artivore card. And that works still pretty well with the Belittle deck. And Spellbound Creepers is a great card. There's just a lot that Briar can do that I don't think has been explored enough yet. So yeah, looking forward to maybe some Dark Horse Briar wins there. I have not picked a hero at all. I'm basically going to pick between these top 5 heroes I have here in SRA tier. I would enjoy playing any of them, and I think they're all powerful enough to win the event. So I will have a Blitz tier list coming in the future, maybe something for draft as well. Probably some deck text coming up about some of these top 5 heroes. You know that I like to focus on the more competitive side of the game, so I'm usually going to focus my deck text on the heroes that I think are the strongest at the moment, without trying to repeat deck text too much. But thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you next time.